Hi, I'm Anna,
I'm Jessica.
and this is the Paranoia Pair. And today I'm going to do mermaids.
I love mermaids.
Me too.
I always wanted to be a mermaid,
Same.
except I can't swim very well.
I hate swimming.
I hate when your fingers get pruny. I can't touch anything, like
hmm
especially my other fingertips. Oh.
I hate how it makes your hair feel afterwards.
And I look like Gollum with wet hair.
Yeah, and I have really fine hair, so I step foot in the ocean for 30 seconds and my hair is just a knotted mess. Okay, so to start us off, sirens, or most often referred to as mermaids, they're actually two different creatures. Sirens' origins are from Greek mythology, and they're first mentioned in Homer's book, The Odyssey, but he did not give any description of what they looked like. Later, another Greek writer named Apollonius of Rhodes helped us put a face to the name. And then many other authors followed suit throughout history, and they all depicted them the same way. They are creatures who appear as these gorgeous women, and they will sing to lure unsuspecting men to their deaths, but their form is not half woman, half fish. They're actually part bird, part woman.
So it's like a hag raven. Or is that?
Yeah, they're kind of similar to another Greek creature.
I know what it is. A griffin? No,
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 it
that's the
starts with an
lion.
H. What are they called?
Harpy.
Yes, they're similar to harpies, but their harpies are sent to deal punishments, whereas the sirens live on an island, like a specific island, and then they lure sailors there and kill them.
The power.
So they're just doing it for fun and to eat, and harpies are doing it as punishment.
Punishment for the harpies or punishment for the people?
Punishment for the people. I'm sure those harpies are loving it. They have a human face with giant feathered wings coming out of their backs and bird like feet. Some of them are also depicted as having beaks, but I think those are supposed to be harpies.
Okay.
So I think those kind of got mixed up. So another Greek creature that actually does resemble mermaids as we know them are called tritinuses or tritons, and they can actually be found on some Athens pottery, which I thought was kind of cute.
Could you explain like Athens pottery?
It's just the movie Hercules,
Mhm.
those pots
Okay.
that those women are on,
Okay. Okay.
and they start dancing. It's like those,
Okay.
which I love those so much. I think they're so pretty.
What was that called?
Athens pottery,
The
tritinuses
yeah.
or tritons. The males are called tritons, and then the females are called tritinuses.
Triton. Tritonuses. My gosh. That's so cool. Well, actually, this is showing a creature from the Winx Club, but I get the point.
Mermaids, on the other hand, have origins from many different cultures, but they are all half women, half fish creatures. The confusion can be linked to many different things, ranging from the rise in pagan water nymphs around the Middle Ages and Christianity taking over paganism and discouraging the beliefs of sirens in the medieval times. And there was even an artist who illustrated a siren as a mermaid, despite the text describing a siren as a bird woman.
I think a siren as a bird woman is way more terrifying than a
Mm-hmm.
siren as like a mermaid.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going in the water anyways, but like birds are scary.
I am terrified of birds.
Yes. My aunt had a cockatoo that used to like chase me around and bite my ankles, and she'd say, "Don't run, because then it incur." And I'm like, "What do I do? Just stand here while he pecks me to death?"
So you're probably wondering, what does Christianity have to do with mermaids and sirens? Well, sirens and mermaids are actually mentioned and described in some historic religious texts. The Book of Enoch, it's an ancient Hebrew religious text, and they mention sirens as being fallen angels. An early Christian priest who translated books into Latin used the word sirens as a translation for the Hebrew word Tenim, and that is in the book of Isaiah. Maybe not siren related, but I felt it was kind of important to include is that the King James version of the Bible does talk about the Leviathan, and a Leviathan is a huge sea creature, like monster. It's like humongous.
I'm so glad that we live in nowadays and not old biblical times because my anxiety could never.
Ancient Greek also places sirens in the book of Isaiah. And between 1040 to 1105 AD, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki,
You nailed that.
I did not, but thank you. He wrote in the Talmud, a Jewish book of law and legend, here are fish in the sea, with which half is in the form of a man and half in the form of a fish called siren in Old French.
What if we misunderstood and their top's the fish and the bottom's the man?
Ooh, like that character off of Fortnite.
I've never played Fortnite, but
I haven't I've played it like maybe 2 times, but I see like memes all the time with that fish guy.
I thought maybe it was like all Family Guy. I've
think
seen something of it somewhere, but that would be terrifying.
I think its name's like Fish Stick or something. He's like the derpiest looking thing ever.
That's pretty derpy. That wasn't as bad as what I was thinking.
Okay. Personally, I also think some of the confusion comes from sirens whose songs entrance men and put them under something like a spell, and mermaids who just also happen to sing.
I was thinking a little more like this.
Oh, that is scary.
Or like, I was specifically thinking that.
Honestly, I kind of love that.
Like the sideways head, fish head, and then just legs. Anyways.
So let's dive further into various cultural stories. The Babylonians have a goddess named Atargatis, and she was overcome by the death of her husband Hadad, and he was the god of storms and thunder, and she jumped into a lake and then she was transformed into a mermaid. She is also connected to the Pisces constellation.
Hey, that's me.
Chinese legend has a dragon king who controls storms, water, and rain, and he has a daughter who rules an underwater kingdom, and his daughter often has the form of a mermaid, and she's friends with underwater creatures such as turtles and even other mermaids. In this legend, she's curious about the human world and comes across a prince who is human. She falls in love with him, but the love is forbidden by her father. Is this ringing any bells about any popular story that we have?
I could not think of a single one.
Little Mermaid, perhaps?
Never heard of it. But does this one end bad?
There's like 2 different versions where like one is like they don't end up together, but they kind of help like bridge the gap between the 2 worlds, and then the other one they do end up together. Many different indigenous people of North America have stories of water spirits. The Ojibwe, I'm gonna try my best to say this. Algonquin, the Potawatomi, the Menominee, and they call them Nibinabe.
Sounds pretty good.
The Micmacs have
That one didn't sound as well.
They have the Walnu. I hope I said that right. And they have control over storms. They don't wish harm to people. And then they say that if you can understand their songs, you'll be able to forecast the weather. The Ningyo is a half woman and half fish water creature that belongs to the Japanese culture, where it's said if you catch and eat one, you'll get eternal beauty and youth. But if you do catch one, there's going to be lots of like big nasty storms coming.
Why is the first thought to eat it?
I don't know. That
That's
feels like cannibalism a little bit.
Because like I get it's half fish, but
It's also half piercing.
I'll be ugly. It's okay.
Scotland has tales of selkies who are often called maids of the sea. The Mamiwata of Africa is a water spirit that made its way over to the North and South Americas during the slave trade. Brazil has the Iara, or Lady of the Waters. Iara as a fish woman who is a immortal and has an underwater kingdom where she takes her sailor lovers to live. They're actually blamed for sailors who go missing while in the Amazon. The Maori are indigenous people of New Zealand, and they tell of another one I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. Marakaihu. Marakaihu are guardians of the sea with human heads and a long fish body. And they also have a long tongue. Think like something similar to like butterflies.
Ooh, no.
Because they're tube-like and they use it to suck up fish and knock over canoes. There's actually lots of carvings of this creature. In Norway, there are folk tales of Finnfolk who are shapeshifters from the sea. They take on human forms and they actually abduct people to make them their servants. Russians have water nymphs called rusalka. They're spirits of girls and women who have died tragic, awful deaths and therefore take it out by luring men and children to their own deaths. Okay, so let's get into the exciting things, the mermaid sightings. In 1st century AD, Pliny the Elder, who was a scientist, wrote about a type of mermaid called Nereids. Um, he wrote about them being found washed up on the shore, and a merman off of the Gulf of Cadiz who would climb up on ships and sink them because of his weight.
Good grief.
Another recounting of a mermaid washed up on shore of the coast of Greenland in the 13th century from a book called Speculum Regale, and it says, quote, like a woman as far down as her waist, long hands and soft hair, the neck and head in all respects like those of a human being. The hands seem to be long and the fingers not to be pointed, so like webbed together. From the waist downwards, this monster resembles a fish with scales, tail, and fins. This shows itself especially before heavy storms. This monster has a very horrible face with a broad brow and piercing eyes, a wide mouth, and double chin.
Didn't people think that like manatees, or not manatees, beluga whales were supposedly mermaids?
Yes, I will actually get into
Okay.
that. Christopher Columbus wrote in his diary that he saw 3 mermaids come to the surface of the water when he was sailing the Dominican Republic, and that they had human like faces but weren't as beautiful as they are in the paintings. So, historians believe that what he spotted was actually manatees, but you cannot logistically look at a manatee and go, A, that resembles a human, or B, go, that is not the most adorable thing I've ever seen.
I like, if I didn't know what a manatee was, I could I could think it being a mythical creature, but like,
They don't even look like humans,
yeah,
though.
where's the human top half?
Yeah.
But I really like that he's like, well, they just weren't as pretty. They were like pretty. Like I would like about a 6 out of 10, but like not as pretty as the paintings depicted.
In 1603, a farmer near Wales named Thomas Reynold seen a mermaid off the coast and went and told the others. They sat and watched this mermaid for 3 hours, and the story was backed up by another man from the area who also witnessed this. They actually published a drawing of the mermaid in the newspaper because they deemed it a credible reporting because multiple people were saying, oh, yeah, this happened.
So did they get a picture or is it a drawing?
They didn't have cameras back then, I don't think. The first camera was in 1816, so they definitely did not have any pictures. They just had to go and draw things, which is probably why there were so many like really good artists back then.
I also read this thing once that like the reason why there's so many mythical creatures sightings like back in the day and not anymore is because everyone like had bad eyesight back then,
Hmm.
and nowadays we have glasses.
Another famous world explorer who seen mermaids was Henry Hudson, and he also kept a journal. Even John Smith, the explorer most notable for his romance with Pocahontas, has recorded seeing mermaids in 1614. He writes, upper part of her body perfectly resembled that of a woman, and she was swimming with all the possible grace near the shore. It had large eyes, rather too round, and a finely shaped nose, a little too short, well formed ears, rather too long, and her long green hair imparted to her an original character by no means unattractive.
Now I'm trying to imagine all of these like characteristics, but on a manatee,
Mhm.
and all but the nose. Like the hair could be like seaweed,
Yeah.
and they're like, "Damn, that's a."
Damn, that's a sexy looking mermaid. In 1670, a reverend in Denmark says he's seen a mermaid with many other witnesses off the shore with long hair holding a fish. July 5th, 1716, a man wrote to the Royal Society of London expressing his belief in mer people. It's said that this man often wrote in his scientific findings. So this wasn't just like some random guy. This was like an actual like scientist.
I mean, obviously we never lived through it, but I really miss the days when like reputable people believed in cryptids. Now, if you
Mhm.
believe in cryptids, you're like, oh, loony.
And they prescribed everybody cocaine for their problems. His evidence was excerpts from ancient Greece where a man found dried bodies of tritons at the town of Tanagra, and Pliny the Elder's works that were also supporting these ideas. The man was not entirely convinced, though, until three men came back from their voyage and told tales of the Triton. These men were considered to be very honest and trustworthy, so he felt compelled to believe them. He wrote, quote, "They had a full view of him and saw his head and face and neck and shoulders and arms and elbows and breasts and the back of a human shape. The lower parts were those of a fish and colored like a mackerel." You're gonna look up mackerel.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't know what it is.
I wonder if that's the swordfish, the one with the long nose.
It's not.
It's not.
No, it's got a scary beak though. Pointy
That
mouth.
is very scary.
That I
I
mean, if
don't
that
like
was like the
that.
tail end of a mermaid, that would be a pretty coloring. Anyways,
In 1718, Samuel Fallers was a painter who claimed to have captured a very small mermaid and kept her in a tub of water in his house. He drew a picture of her and says she died after 4 days of starvation despite his attempt to nurse her back to health. On May 6th, 1736, Benjamin Franklin, who owned the Pennsylvania Gazette, wrote in the paper warning the readers of a creature that was spotted and captured around the Bermuda. The top half was similar to a 12-year-old boy, and the bottom was one of a fish. Because it looked so human like, they decided to let it go. In 1739, there was a mermaid that was displayed in the city of Exeter in England after it jumped out of the water and died. I did look it up, and there has been like no official like findings of a mermaid's body, and all the ones that claim to be a mermaid are like part of a monkey, like top half monkey, bottom half fish that they have like put together,
what
and
the heck?
it's like mummified. There's stingrays that people would cut and taxidermy them to look kind of like these alien looking water creatures. It's real creepy.
Oh my god!
Isn't it so creepy?
Somebody made this.
Yeah. It's a cut up stingray.
I would drown myself if I seen that. It's like one of those things you should never see is a stingray's face.
It's horrifying.
If we could like have it to where like our podcast episodes had pictures,
Mhm.
that would be the one I would want for the mermaid pic for the mermaid episode.
Maybe I'll insert the picture. Another newspaper article came out in 1769 in the Providence Gazette. Crew members of a ship off of Brest, France, say that a beautiful mermaid had circled their ship, and this was backed up by the entire crew and their captain. So everybody who was on board that ship backed up this story. William Monroe, who was a school teacher, lived on the coast of England in 1797. He has a written account of his encounter with a mermaid, and he writes, "I was a parochial. Parochial?
Parochial. Adjective. Relating to a church parish or Having limited or narrow outlook or scope, but since that was capitalized, I'm gonna assume it was the first one.
He writes, I was a parochial schoolmaster at Ray in the course of my walking on the shore of Sandside Bay. That rhymed. Being a fine warm day in the summer, I was induced to extend my walk towards Sandside Head when my attention was arrested by the appearance of a figure resembling an unclothed human female sitting upon a rock extending into the sea, and apparently in the action of combing its hair, which flowed around its shoulders and of a light brown color. The resemblance which the figure bore to its prototype in all its visible parts was so striking that had not the rock on which it was sitting been dangerous for bathing, I would have been constrained to have regarded it as really in human form, and to an eye unaccustomed to the situation, it must have been undoubtedly appeared as such. The head was covered with hair of the color above mentioned, and shaded on the crown, the forehead round, and the face was plump. The cheeks ruddy, the eyes blue, the mouth and lips of a natural form, resembling those of a man. The teeth I could not discover as the mouth was shut. It remained on the rock 3 or 4 minutes after I observed it, and was exercised during that period in combing its hair, which was long and thick, and of which it appeared proud, and then dropped into the sea, which was level with the abdomen, from whence it did not reappear to me. It may be necessary to remark that previous to the period I beheld the object, I had heard it frequently reported by several persons, and some of them I never heard disputed that they had seen such a phenomenon as I have described, though then, like many others, I was not disposed to credit their testimony on the subject. I can say in truth that it was only by seeing the phenomenon I was perfectly convinced of its existence. If the above narrative can in any degree be subservient towards establishing the existence of a phenomenon, almost incredible to naturalists, or to remove the skepticism of others who are ready to dispute everything which they cannot fully comprehend, you are welcome to it. In 1801, an actual governor wrote the following: the upper portion resembles the human figure, the head smaller in proportion, sometimes bare, but oftener covered with a copious quantity of long black hair. The shoulders are broad, and the breast large and well formed.
I like that he had to
You know what they
comment.
need? They need a description of these boobs.
That's like the last thing I'm wondering is the size of the chest
Yeah.
bit. I'm really glad that I know.
It's nice to know that men haven't really changed much. The lower portion resembles the tail portion of a fish, and it's of immense dimension. The tail forked and not unlike that of a dolphin, as it usually represented. The color of the skin is either black or tawny, which is like brownish color. The animal is held in a veneration and dread by the Indians, who imagine that killing it would be attended with disastrous consequences. It is from this circumstance that none of these animals have been shot and consequently not examined but at a distance, none of the lower extremities being discovered until they are disturbed. They have always been seen employed in smoothing their hair or stroking their faces and breasts with their hands. They basically have been frequently mistaken for Indian women bathing. Indian, I don't know if they mean like indigenous, like Native American, or like Indian as in Indonesian.
I feel like I'm assuming it was like indigenous American,
Mm-hmm.
but it could be either, I suppose.
Yeah. And yet another newspaper, but this time in Scotland, called the Kentish Gazette. In 1809, they published a letter they received from the daughter of a reverend. And she says she walked to the beach with her cousins and seen 3 people sitting on rocks. When she walked closer, she could clearly see that they were mermaids. In the letter, she writes that their faces were plump and round, and their eyes and nose were small. The lower half was like a light gray color, so like the tail. And then the mouth was large, the jawbone was straight, and the forehead, nose, and chin were white, and the whole upper part of their body was like a pinkish color. The head was round and the hair was thick and long. The waves were going over its face, and it It looked like it felt annoyed. Both of its hands threw back its hair frequently and rubbed its throat as if to remove any soiling it might have received from it. So, like sand. A year later, in 1810, a story was published in the British press about a fisherman who heard a noise he thought was an injured bird. He went to investigate, but he found it was a dead body of a small mermaid child that probably got injured in the recent passing storm. But nearby, he found another mermaid child who was around 2 feet long, green, stringy hair, similar to seaweed. He scooped them up, took them back to his house, and nursed it back to health, feeding it mussels and occasionally giving it milk. And then, when it recovered, he took it back to sea. 1811, a married couple testified in court that they had seen a mermaid. John, the husband, says he's seen an animal with the top half that was white and resembled a human body, and the bottom half that was scaled and had a tail. It had long brown hair and webbed fingers, and it was around 4 to 5 feet long. During the summer in Scotland in 1814, a little boy said he's seen a mermaid, but as it usually is, it was dismissed as childhood imagination. And a month later, multiple kids seen the same mermaid, but they went and got the other people from the village, and then they all gathered closer to the water, and the mermaid started hissing at them before it eventually swam off.
I do that in social situations as well.
Still in Scotland, but in 1830, people spotted a mermaid off the coast and they started throwing rocks at it and they tried to capture it. A few days later, though, its body washed up to shore and it was later buried in a coffin where many people had attended.
That's also a terrible way to lay to rest a mermaid.
Yeah.
Putting it in a coffin in the
And
ground.
yeah, these next two sightings happened around the same area, but were 23 years apart. In 1890, near Dearness in Scotland, there was a mermaid that was spotted several times by locals in the Newark Bay. It was spotted so much that they named it the Dearness Mermaid. It's described to be around 6 to 7 feet long and looks like a human when it's swimming. It can move and wave its hands, and it's often seen sitting on a sunken rock. And it was seen again in 1913, where multiple sightings were recorded. A group of fishermen went out to check their lobster traps one day and they seen the mermaid, and they actually claim that they've seen this mermaid 3 total times. Japanese soldiers spotted multiple mermaids in what's now Indonesia in 1943, so this was during World War II. These mermaids were described as having pink toned skin with a human face and limbs. A sergeant heard that a mermaid's body washed up on shore and tried to get the scientists to examine it, but the scientists refused, saying the sightings were invalid and they didn't believe that these creatures really existed. And he unfortunately could not convince them that the sightings were in fact real. A few years later, in 1947, a fisherman spotted a mermaid sitting on top of a float crate. And a float crate is used to preserve live lobsters. She was brushing her hair, and after she noticed that she had been seen, she dove into the water and swam away. When the fisherman was questioned, he insisted that he was confident in what he saw. Multiple tourists on a ferry in British Columbia in 1967 say they seen a mermaid in the water eating what looked like a salmon, and it was actually recorded in the local newspaper. 1998 in Kauai, a diver reported seeing a mermaid, and he said, "I'd heard about her before. Most of us who are out in these waters regularly have heard stories, but I'd never seen her until that morning. We were on our way out to the point when a school of dolphins started following the boat, playing in the wake. Suddenly, one of the men on the port side starts yelling and pointing. I couldn't believe what I saw. There, not 10 feet from the bow, was what looked like a nude woman. Then she leapt into the air, and my heart almost gave out on me. The entire lower half of her was covered with scales and it tapered back into a huge fishtail. She jumped once more and then disappeared under the surface." And he actually took photos of the mermaid and they were authenticated by experts 3 times.
That's pretty cool.
Mhm.
Did you see the pictures?
Yes. They have, a little story on, their website. It's on Jack's Diving Locker website. Um, because the guy was a diving instructor who took the
Okay.
pictures, and they actually have, like, his picture that he took and then testimonial, like, the story that he gave to them.
Okay. When was this taken?
This was taken in 1998,
Okay.
so pretty recent, but apparently, all 10 people on the boat witnessed the incident.
Why is it that there's only only anyone sees the female mermaids? Like,
Right?
how did they
Well, earlier there was that one accounting of the male mermaid. Some of the most recent accounts of mermaid sightings occur in 2008, 2009, and 2012. In 2008, David and his friends were by a river and they heard what sounded like a thumping against a wall. They went to go see what the noise was, and it was what looked like a white skinned woman with dark hair thrashing around in the water. He did try to help her, but she made a shrieking sound that his mother said sounded scared and heartbreaking. And when he made eye contact with her, the woman had red colored eyes, and it froze him in his tracks. He says that he saw what was called a caiman, which are half fish, half human creatures, and they live in the deep rivers and have white silver skin, long black hair, and red eyes. In 2009, in Israel, a man named Shlomo, as he was with his friends, when he saw a woman laying in the sand. She was laying kind of weird, and he thought maybe she was just a woman trying to get a tan. But when they went closer up to her, she jumped in the water and disappeared, and the men kind of stood there shocked at the sight of her tail. The council spokesperson says many people are telling us they are sure they've seen a mermaid, and they are all independent of each other. People say it's half girl, half fish, jumping like a dolphin. It does all kinds of tricks and then disappears. There's actually a $1 million reward for anyone who catches footage of her.
It's just crazy to me that they have a $1 million reward for it. Like,
Hmm.
that somebody is so certain it's real.
Yeah.
That's gonna set you up for life. And I don't know what, like, the US dollar to
I think
Israel
that
currency is.
actually, it's not that much.
Really?
Yeah. So 1 million new shekels are only $276,897 US.
Okay, so it's not a million, but that's still a pretty hefty reward
Mhm. Just
for it.
for taking pictures of a mermaid?
Yeah, we can buy a tail.
We could.
And I'm not going in the water, but we could get you to go in the water.
Our final sighting takes place in Zimbabwe in 2012. At the construction site of a dam, a mermaid scared workers so bad they refused to finish building. After the government claimed to have done ritual cleansing to get rid of the mermaid, they still refused to go back to work. So they hired workers from out of the country to finish the build, and they had the same experience. And to this day, the dam has not been finished. So there's actually a scientific theory that could help us explain the existence of mermaids. It's called aquatic ape theory. It was super popular in like I think the 70s and 80s. So according to the theory, millions of years ago, there was lots of competition for food by the primates. Some went and found food from water because it does make up 95% of the earth. They eventually evolved into being able to live in the water because they were in it so much, therefore making mermaids. This would explain why we have mostly hairless bodies, unlike apes. And this would help make us much more efficient swimmers. We can also hold our breath longer than any other land mammal.
I don't believe this. I got like a solid 7 seconds.
I at the community pool in our hometown, I used to be able to hold my breath and go from one end of the pool to the other end, still underwater, make my way back to the original end of the pool
That's
in
that's
one breath.
that's impressive. I'm such a slow swimmer that when I go down and, like, I think I'm like Michael Phelps,
Mhm.
and then when I, like, resurface, I've gone, like, a foot and a half. So, it's like, the amount of time it would take me to get from one end to I'd drown.
Okay. So our fingers also get wrinkled when exposed to water, making it easier for us to grip things. And we also have that little bit of webbing between our fingers and toes. Some babies are actually born with completely webbed hands. Babies also know how to hold their breath underwater instinctively, and they also kick their legs and move their arms around in like an effort to swim. And this is like all on instinct. This theory does have a lot of support in the science community. There are scientists, though, who don't believe this theory. They think that there are human like creatures in the sea that we haven't discovered yet, but that they're not exactly mermaids as we know them to be. But human like creatures nonetheless. I would also like to remind you that we've only explored less than 5% of the ocean. But mermaids and their mythical relatives have kind of like wove themselves into human storytelling and our cultures and captivated us with tales of beauty, mystery, and wonder. From sirens of ancient Greece to mermaid sightings in modern times, historical accounts ranging from Pliny the Elder to 21st century reports add to the excitement and possibility that continues to spark our imagination. The aquatic ape theory really offers a scientific perspective onto their existence, suggesting evolutionary pathways that could explain these legends. Whether viewed as figments of our imagination or undiscovered creatures of the deep, mermaids remained a testament to our undying curiosity of the mysterious depths of the ocean, as well as continue to play a huge part in our culture.
I watched a video or I read something that if mermaids existed today, they would not be pretty because, like, being in the water
Mhm.
constantly, they'd have, like, thick, rubbery skin
Yeah,
and, like
and they would also probably be, inbred, I
oh,
would
yeah,
think,
not big slut. Well,
like British royalty.
the one I don't know where David's from. I either zoned out or you didn't say, but you said that was in 2008, and
Mhm.
I'd like to believe he could have had a cell phone on him. Maybe not the highest quality. I mean, we had flip phones.
He is from the Western Cape of South Africa. He is from a small village in Serbrak.
And it sucks now with AI coming out too, because now even if we do get footage of a mermaid, like, it's gonna be hard to believe because I just seen one the other day of AI pulling a mermaid out of something.
Mhm.
And, like, obviously now you can tell it's not real, but, like, in 5 years
And there's so much AI going around on Facebook, even for, like, recipes. How should I end this?
I really think we should write an ending, like, to
Mhm.
say,
We'll work on our ending. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening.
"Bye."
Bye.